Hey y'all, iRick's Guy here, and I want to talk about the a7 III, and again, me coming from a7R2, which was a 42 megapixel camera. Is the a7 III at only 24 megapixels, is that a downgrade? Well, I was nervous at first, and I was super concerned. I'm like, man, should I spend more and get the a7R3? Because I really wanted the enhanced battery life that the a7 III and a7R3 bring to the table. But also wanted awesome autofocus. Now this video, it's worth mentioning, I'm filming this in autofocus, which is unusual because with the a7R2, if I was doing this same type of face-on video segment, I would probably be using manual focus because of the focus breathing that a7R2 had. But is the megapixel thing an issue? And I will tell you from my experience, and I've been using the a7 III for a few days now, it's not. Or maybe it is. So let me explain this. So 42 megapixel, when you think of something that's 42 megapixel, you got a lot larger file size and a larger physical canvas. So for example, if I was shooting a, let's just say like with this 25mm lens, for example, I was shooting some still photos and there was a tiny little boat within that photo. If I had shot that photo with the a7R2 or the a7R3 in 42 megapixel, I could zoom in post-production and still have a somewhat clear boat, you know, a tiny object out of that huge canvas. If I did the same thing with a 24 megapixel, I would probably notice that when I zoomed in within post that it looks a little grainy. And that's because the image, 24 megapixel versus 42 megapixel. But now let's just take all that out of our heads and let's think about a real-world use case. I've been using this a7 III for several days now, snapping a ton of still photos. Still photos are rock solid. Actually, I'm benefiting from the better autofocus performance that this camera brings to the table. Actually, the autofocus on the a7 III is not only better than the a7R2's autofocus, but it's also better than the more expensive a7R3's autofocus. So the autofocus thing on this camera is absolutely incredible. Now for 4K video, that's the megapixel, to my knowledge, is not even applicable, because I've already filmed a ton of 4K video segments with the a7 III, and actually I think the 4K on this looks better than the a7R2, and I attribute that to the better HDR, high dynamic range. So if you're on the fence, now if you're, let's say you're a landscape photographer and you need the extra megapixels, maybe you need to go with the a7R2 or the a7R3. But even if you're a serious photographer, serious videographer, this a7 III is probably going to more than fit the bill. And you may even like it more, not just because of the price, but because of the autofocus. The autofocus on this thing is so rock solid. I find myself using autofocus in video now like this, and it's something that was unheard of in the past. So super awesome. I don't miss the 42 megapixel. The other reason I don't miss it is that looking at my storage, and I use Lightroom CC, which is a product for editing my raw images during post. And when I look at the file size that those 42 megapixel images consumed versus the 24 megapixel images from this, that's another advantage, less storage space. So whether you're using cloud-based storage on the internet, or storing photos locally on your computer, that's another benefit to having 24 megapixel. So again, I'm not trying to sell anyone on 24 versus 42 megapixel, but I'm just trying to illustrate using real-world examples as to why I don't think it's that big of a deal. At least for my use case, it's not. This a7 III, 24 megapixel, better autofocus, same battery life as the more expensive a7R3. It's a no-brainer for me. The a7 III was the one that I needed. But let's say hypothetically that 42 megapixel camera would have been able to perform as well as this 24 megapixel camera. Maybe it had the same amount of autofocus points or more. That would have made the decision more challenging. But still, you're stuck with images at a larger file size that are going to consume more disk space locally on your computer or on the internet in your cloud storage plan. So just a few things to take into consideration. Check the link within this video's description. You can find the 25mm lens that I used to film this video, the microphone that I used to film this video, the tripod, and of course the a7 III. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe. youtube.com a7iii.com/iRickSky. Y'all have a good day. Hey y'all, iRickSky here. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to subscribe, like, and share. It's viewers like you that enable my channel to continue to grow. Thank you.